Hi, this is JP Miller with Reach. Welcome to our Wisdom for Sale tutorial, carrying on with us. In the last section, we just deployed the contract using the seller and printed out a contract address so that a buyer will be able to attach that contract. Now we need to give the buyer the functionality to do so. So let's hop back over to our front end. And just like we did where we created functionality for the seller, and then we went to the back end and defined that, we're going to do the same thing for our buyer. As part of this process, we're going to introduce an ask object. And so ask is an object that the Reach Standard Library provides that allows the contract to ask yes or no questions or open-ended questions that the user can fill out and will create like predestined answers that are possible. And so let's add that ask object. So we'll just add that in here. Import load standard library ask, and then we'll jump down around lines 39 or so to the buyer. So yeah, line 39, and we're interested here again in line 40 for that buyer interact. So where are the common interact? We'll leave that in there. And the buyer is going to need to be able to confirm that they want to purchase the wisdom. And they'll also need to be able to attach to the contract. So we'll build all that in now. So let's start with our new method, and we'll call this confirm price or confirm purchase. And we'll set the price as an input. And our output is going to be a bit more interesting now. We're going to ask, hey, do you want to purchase the wisdom? And so let's say, do you want to purchase this wisdom for the price? And of course, we've hard-coded that price to be $5 for the time being. But at some point, we'll want to think about giving our users more autonomy so they're not bound to a certain price all the time. And then we're going to add a new ask method called ask.yesNo. And this expects a yes or a no for a return, or a y or an n. And we'll accept nothing else. Okay. Okay, then we'll set up our account. We'll say, hey, your new test account is iBalance, so the initial balance. And then we'll wait for some information. And we'll say, hey, as this ask.ask, now this is going to be open-ended. This is going to say paste in the contract information. And we'll parse that JSON of that string. Okay, so this is going to allow our buyer to paste in the contract at the ask prompt, and then be able to interact with seller. Okay, then we'll await our show balance. I had a minus sign instead of an equals there. It's an honest mistake. We'll set up our contract for our buyer. And the buyer will inherit the buyer interact methods. And now we'll show that balance again. And so we'll get the comparison of the balance before we attach the contract and after we have attached the contract. One last thing we'll show here is an ask.done method. And so this means that, hey, I'm done asking questions. I won't be using this ask object anymore. It's very common that ask.done is one of the last lines in your front-end program. So something should be brought to attention here. And let me get my place here. Yeah, so you'll notice here on line 48, we wrote await contract.p.buyer interact. And this is the contract participants buyer. So the buyer as the contract participant. But you notice in line 36, we wrote await contract.participants.seller of seller interact, taking that as an argument. And it makes sense to us that the seller should have the seller interact object and the buyer should have the buyer interact object. That makes sense. But what is this about the .p and the .participants? Well, these are two different variations and ways that you can call your participant as part of the contract. And so we can use the long form .participants or the short form .p. Now myself, I tend to prefer the .p. I think it's a bit more elegant, and I know what the .p means. It means participants when I'm working in my Reach applications. But if it helps you, you can absolutely use the long form of the .participants. And this works either way. We can change participants to P or change it around. As long as we use that P or participants, we're golden. Okay, so that ends where we're at in the front end. So just like we did in the last unit, we're going to, now that we have created this confirm purchase method, we are going to update that in our backend now. And so we'll define what confirm purchase means in our backend. So let's do that. And of course, confirm purchase, you recall, is a function that takes in an integer as the input and has and this does have an output of the JSON string. All right, so we're going to create our confirm purchase. And as you recall on the front end, this is a method that takes in an integer as this is a method that takes in an integer as an input, and by virtue of that s.yes/no has an output of a Boolean because yes/no translates to true or false. Okay, so let's build that. We'll have this as a function that takes in a uint and outputs a bool. Oh, and I forgot that paren again. There it is. Okay, so that's that. Okay, and now that we've added our new method into the buyer interact, we're going to give Bob the ability to provide some instructions. So down at the bottom here, line 24, I said Bob, I meant buyer. It's a habit, always thinking about Alice and Bob, buyer, seller. It's kind of the same principle, but B is for buyer in this case. And so now we're in buyer's local step. So we'll have this will buy, and we'll declassify the information of whether they will buy it or not. And we'll confirm the purchase. So this new constant of will buy will carry the value, that Boolean value, true or false, yes or no. Okay, let's see, look at that. And get our semicolons in there. And then buyer will publish. I got it right that time. So we'll buy. And we'll say, hey, if it's not will buy, if you won't buy it, then we'll just commit. But if you will buy it, well, we'll do something else, right? I forgot my proper syntax. Okay, and so buyer will publish the value of will buy, and now we'll set up a conditional. So if we will not buy, then we'll just simply commit the information. But if we will buy, then we'll also commit. So at this point, no difference in whether the participant buys or doesn't buy. We have no change. This commit needs to go. There we go. So we need to remove that old commit. Before we did not have this if statement, and we just had the commit. So we need to remove that commit and the extra angle bracket. Okay, and now you'll see that our buyer has has instructions, and so we'll save this and we're going to open our terminal. At this point now, we have the ability to deploy and to attach to the contract. So let's set our method is algo, and our configuration, our connector mode. Let's set our connector mode to algo. Grab that, paste that in, and we'll do a reach run index seller, and we'll let this run, and then we'll open up a reach run index buyer. Okay, there's no failures. I meant to do a compile, but yeah, that's okay. Okay, so here we have our contract, and now the contract is just waiting. So seller's just waiting for us to make a move on the buyer side. So let me stretch the screen a bit here, and let's do a reach run index buyer. And it should ask us for a contract, so paste in contract information. You'll see I'll paste in the quotations and all. And do I want to purchase the wisdom? Well, I can say yes or no. If you recall in the code, it doesn't matter anything because we commit either way. It says, hey, here's your balance now. So my balance is $9.99. This is just gas fees for interacting with the contract. And on the seller's end, the game just ends, or the contract ends, and looks like Alice paid 3/1000ths of an algo in order to deploy that contract. Okay, well that will conclude this section. So we've successfully attached to our contract. In the next section, we will see how we can cancel a transaction. And so be sure to join me. If you need resources, source code, documentation, and other links are all in the description below. So be sure to check that out. And look forward to seeing you in the next video where we cancel a transaction.